Picking UI colors has always been this kind of abstract process. I never really felt like I had a grasp on how to systematically do it, how to have some logical reasoning behind my color selections, and that's really made things difficult when it came to past projects that I was working on. And as if the universe was listening to this, I got contacted by a representative from Supercharge Design, which is this company. They're really popular on Instagram. They post a lot of these UI design tips and tricks. It's headed by this guy named Andrija Prelik. I think that's how you say his name. Anyway, I got asked to test out their new UI Colors Masterclass. So I was like, hell yeah, I absolutely want to do that. So all that to say, I have taken the course and I wanted to share what I think about it. This is not a sponsored video, so I'm going to be sharing what I like about it and what I don't like about it. I'm going to be very honest with you about what I think about this course and whether or not I think it's worth it. So let's dive in. Let's start with the setup of the course. So there's really three main types of content within this course. There are the lesson videos, there are the assignments, and then there are PDF resources. And the lesson videos can really be broken down into two subtypes. There are the actual lecture videos and the follow-along videos. And so for the lecture videos, you're basically watching the instructor Andrija teach on camera about the different principles of color, and then there are visuals to accompany what he's talking about. In the follow-along videos, you watch Andrija as he works in Figma to manipulate and work with colors. And so for me, I had an instance of Figma open, and I would try to just follow along with what he's doing and mimic it on my instance of Figma. Now, the one downside to this is that sometimes I couldn't always follow along with Andrija. So there's one section of the course where he's working on figuring out the color selections for a mobile app screen. Well, the problem is I didn't have access to that mobile app screen, so I couldn't really follow along with what he was doing. It was still a valuable lesson just to hear his thought process, but I think the course would be made better if he actually included the assets to what he's working on in some of these follow-along videos. Now, some of the follow-along videos, there aren't assets that you need to have, and a lot of them are just him working from scratch, so I could follow along really easily. But for those sections where there are assets being used, it would be nice to have those as downloads. Moving on to assignments, in this course you also have a Figma file that is full of assignments that you are supposed to work on as you go through this course. And so basically the ideal workflow is that you go through a video lesson, and then in that Figma file there is an associated assignment that you work on to just practice what was taught in the video. And I didn't exactly do it like that. I'm not a good student. I did work on some of the assignments, but I didn't exactly work on the assignment after every video. I will say that the assignments that I did do were helpful. For example, there was one assignment that I remember where I had to create darker and lighter variations of a given base color using only hue. I couldn't change saturation or brightness. And so that was interesting because I had to take into account how different colors on the color wheel have different levels of perceived brightness or luminosity. And so taking that into account, I had to think about how I can manipulate hue slightly to achieve a darker or lighter variation. So I probably should go back and do some more of these assignments because they are quite useful. But honestly, I just tend to prefer the follow-along videos where I can just work alongside someone. Aside from the videos and assignments, you also get access to a slew of PDF resources that basically summarize a lot of the main course content and arrange it into these digestible PDF documents. And so one of the PDF resources that I like a lot is there is this color psychology PDF, which basically goes over all of the major colors that are typically used in UI designs, and then it goes over the psychology behind those colors. So what attributes and characteristics they are typically associated with. And so I find this to be helpful because that has always been a mystery to me. And I think it'll be useful when I eventually do freelance and start working with clients, especially if they don't have an already established brand color. I have found from previous courses that a lot of times these PDF resources can be pretty scrappily put together, just very unpolished. I will say that the ones in this course seem to be very well put together. They're very polished, and so I do appreciate that. And so I think these actually will prove to be useful for a lot of people. The course itself is broken up into 3 sections. Number 1, the foundations. Number 2, working with color. And number 3, color mastery. I could go in detail about what each of these sections goes into. That seems a little bit boring, so instead I'm just going to give a very brief description about what is in each one, and then I want to talk about kind of like the big things that I've learned in each of these sections. The first section, Foundations, goes over things like color science, color attributes, naming systems, color psychology, color harmony, and other topics like that. One thing that I found very helpful within this section is changing Figma's color palette setting to HSL. So Andriha goes over a very convincing argument for why designers should use HSL as opposed to other systems, especially as it pertains to having an easier way to create shades and tints of a particular color. Another aspect of this section I like is his discussion on luminosity and perceived brightness, something I kind of touched on a little bit earlier in this video, but he goes over how different areas of the color wheel have different levels of perceived brightness. And so where this becomes interesting is that you can have 2 colors that should, in theory, work well together, but actually don't when you see them visually together, and that can often be because their luminosity values are too similar, and that can cause them to clash when they're visually used together, even though on paper they should work well together. And so I just found that to be a pretty neat discussion and something I've never really thought about before. The second section is working with color, and in this section Andriha goes over the different categories of colors used in UI design, such as primary, secondary, accent, semantic, that kind of a thing, as well as showing examples of each of those. And then he also goes over how to create a neutral color palette that works really well with a chosen primary color. And so one of the things that I really liked in this section is he goes over how to create shades and tints that create a sense of elevation in your design, taking into account proper lighting physics. And so I found this to be just a really cool topic to delve into because I have definitely fucked this up in one of my previous designs. And so seeing how he talks about how to create proper elevation in UI design, it just clears up a lot of things for me. Another thing that I found useful in this section is he goes over popular app screens that he pulled from Mobbin, and he color picks the main colors within the app screen. And he talks about why the designer probably chose the color palette that they did, and he goes over how the neutral palette kind of goes along with the primary color and the different ways that they tend to work well together. The final section is color mastery, which goes over topics such as creating a color palette from scratch, how to make effective gradients, and how to design for dark mode. And one thing that I found particularly useful was watching Andriha create a color palette from scratch. So he starts off with a primary base color, and he rationalizes how he makes his decisions with creating different tints and shades, taking into account how different levels of brightness will affect the saturation and how he accounts for that. When I think about the projects that I did in the past and how I created tints and shades, it was not good compared to how he does it. And so I feel like I've gained a lot of clarity just watching him work by creating the proper color palette. And then the other thing that I found useful was watching how he designs in dark mode. And one thing that I learned from this is that often a primary color that looks good in light mode will often not look good in dark mode. And so he goes over how to adjust the primary color to make it work better in dark mode. And that's just not something that I've ever had to deal with because I've never really created in dark mode. So having that knowledge, I think, will just help me going forward when I do have to design an app that has a dark mode. So the course is $199 US, and is it worth it? Well, I tested the course for free, so for me it's worth it. Is it worth the price though? And I think that $199 might be a little bit steep given the scope of this course. I think that a good Goldilocks zone for this course would probably be $150. But then again, if you are someone that wants to deep dive into figuring out how to logically and systematically choose colors for your project, then I haven't really seen where there's a lot of other courses like this. So I think that this may be worth the investment anyway. And I know for me, I definitely feel more confident with being able to have some reasoning when it comes to choosing colors for a project, as well as having the ability to create a color palette from scratch. And so for that, I think it definitely can be worth it depending on how much you want to learn that kind of material. But with that being said, I do have a link for the course. If you want to learn more about it, it's in the description below. It is an affiliate link, so if you want to support this channel, then that is a great way to do so. And if you have found this video to be helpful, then definitely hit the subscribe button. That would help me out a lot. And if you're interested, you can check out this video here that you might be interested in. And until next time, I will see you in the next video. Take care.